Ladies and gentlemen, I want to start today with a question, and I don't want you to answer it out loud. I want you to answer it in that quiet place inside yourself where you can't lie, where the performance stops and the truth lives. Here is the question. When was the last time you were truly, completely, unreservedly happy? Not relieved, not distracted, not temporarily entertained, not numb, not busy enough to forget. I mean, happy. The kind of happiness that isn't dependent on anything going right. The kind that sits in your chest like a warm, steady fire that doesn't need to be constantly fed. The kind where you wake up in the morning and your first feeling is not dread or anxiety or the immediate reaching for your phone to check what you missed. The kind where you look at your life, really look at it, and you feel something close to peace. When was the last time? Take a moment with that question. Let it sit. Because I think for most of you, the honest answer is uncomfortable. The honest answer is I'm not sure, or a long time ago, or I don't know if I've ever felt that. And if that's your answer, if you're sitting with that truth right now and it feels heavy, I want you to know that you are not broken. You are not failing at life. You are not uniquely damaged or unfortunate or beyond reach. You are suffering from the single biggest cause of human unhappiness that exists on this planet. And it is not what you think it is. It is not your circumstances. It is not your past. It is not your bank account or your relationship status or your career or your health or the family you grew up in or the opportunities you were or weren't given. It is something far closer than any of those things. It is something you carry with you every second of every day. It is something so familiar, so constant, so deeply woven into the fabric of how you think and how you speak and how you see yourself and the world, that most people never even recognize it as the source of their pain. They just live inside it, like fish who don't know they're wet. The biggest cause of your unhappiness is the gap between the life you are living and the life you believe you should be living. It is the constant, relentless, exhausting comparison between what is and what you have decided ought to be. It is the story you are telling yourself every minute of every day about how your life is measuring up. And almost always, in almost everyone, that story concludes the same way. Not enough, not there yet, not good enough, not happy enough, not successful enough, not loved enough, not far enough along, not what it was supposed to be by now. That gap, that story, that endless grinding invisible verdict that you are somehow behind, somehow less than, somehow failing the standard. That is the thing that is stealing your joy, not your circumstances. Your story about your circumstances. And today, together, we are going to pull that story out of the shadows and look at it clearly. Because you cannot change what you cannot see. And once you see it, once you really fully, honestly see it, I promise you that something will shift. I promise you that something will shift. Not everything all at once, but something today will change. Let me start with a man named David. David was 44 years old when I met him. He had what most people would call a successful life. Good career, a house in a decent neighborhood, 2 kids who were healthy, a marriage that was, by external measures, functioning. He wasn't rich, but he wasn't struggling. He had enough. By almost any objective standard, David had enough. And David was one of the most quietly miserable people I have ever met. Not dramatically miserable. He wasn't in crisis. He wasn't on the edge. He was just dim, like a light that should have been bright but had somehow gradually been turned down so slowly that nobody had noticed, including him. He went through his days with a vague, persistent dissatisfaction that he couldn't name. He told himself he was just tired. He told himself he was just stressed. He told himself he was just going through a phase that would pass when things settled down, when the kids got older, when the mortgage got smaller, when work got easier. He had been telling himself those things for 11 years. I asked David, the first time we spoke, to describe what a good day looked like for him. And he thought about it for a long time. And then he said something that broke my heart a little. He said, a good day is one where I don't feel behind, not a day filled with joy. Not a day of connection or meaning or laughter or love. A good day for David was simply a day when the feeling of being behind was less loud than usual. He had spent 11 years measuring his life against an invisible standard, against a picture of what his life was supposed to look like by 44, against his version of success that had been constructed from a combination of what his parents expected, what his peers seemed to have achieved, What social media presented as the norm and what some 18-year-old version of himself had decided was the definition of a life well lived. And every single day, without exception, his real life fell short of that picture. Every day he looked at what he had and measured it against what he thought he should have. And the verdict, every single day, was not enough. That is not a life. That is not a life. That is a sentence. A life sentence served inside your own mind in a prison with no walls and no bars that you are free to walk out of the moment you understand what is keeping you there. What was keeping David there? What is keeping so many of us there is something psychologists call the arrival fallacy. The belief that happiness is a destination. The belief that you will be happy when you get the promotion, when you lose the weight, when you find the relationship, when the kids are grown, when you move to the new city, when you finally have the life that matches the picture in your head. The arrival fallacy is one of the cruelest tricks the human mind plays on itself. Because the moment you arrive, the moment you actually achieve the thing you were certain would make you happy, the goalpost moves. The mind, which has been trained to find the gap, finds a new gap. The promotion comes and now you need the bigger promotion. The weight comes off and now you need the fitness level. The relationship begins and now you need it to be a particular kind of relationship. The city changes and the dissatisfaction comes with you because the dissatisfaction was never about the city. The arrival fallacy keeps you in permanent motion toward a happiness that perpetually recedes. It is like trying to catch your own shadow. You can walk toward it forever, and it will always be exactly one step ahead. And the tragedy, the real heartbreaking tragedy, is that while you are chasing the shadow, you are walking through a garden. A real, living, imperfect, extraordinary garden of actual experiences and actual people and actual moments that are happening right now. And you cannot see them because your eyes are fixed on the shadow. This is the biggest cause of your unhappiness. Not that your life is insufficient, but that you are too busy measuring it to actually live it. I want to tell you about a woman named Priya. Priya grew up in a family that placed enormous value on achievement. Not in a cruel way. Her parents loved her genuinely and deeply. But their love, she realized later, was always expressed most warmly in response to her accomplishments. The A on the test, the first place in the competition, the school record in swimming, the college acceptance. And Priya, being smart and perceptive and desperately wanting to be loved, learned the lesson perfectly. She learned that her value was in her performance, that being good was not enough. She had to be the best. She had to be measurably, demonstrably better than the person beside her in order to feel secure in her own worth. She became extraordinarily successful. By her mid-30s, she was running a department of 60 people at a company that every person in her industry respected. She had a salary most people in her city would consider life-changing. She had a beautiful apartment, a social life that looked enviable from the outside, and a resume that made people lean forward with interest at dinner parties. And Priya was deeply, profoundly unhappy. She told me, sitting in a coffee shop, both hands wrapped around her cup, speaking in the quiet voice of someone saying something they've never said before. She told me, I have achieved everything I thought would make me happy, and I am less happy than I ever been. And the most terrifying part is that I don't know who I am without the achieving. I don't know what I would be if I stopped. I don't even know what I enjoy anymore. I've been performing for so long, I've forgotten what it feels like to just be performing. That word. I've heard it from so many people in so many forms. I've been performing. I've been maintaining the appearance of a life that matches the story rather than living the actual life that is available to me. And the performance is exhausting. The performance is relentless. Because the audience, the imaginary audience you perform for, the composite of every person whose opinion has ever mattered to you, is never satisfied. It always wants another act, another achievement, another proof of worth, another demonstration that you deserve your place at the table. Then you cannot rest, because resting feels like falling behind. You cannot be still, because stillness feels like stagnation. You cannot enjoy what you have, because enjoying what you have feels like settling. You cannot stop comparing yourself to others, because the comparison is the only measure you trust. And every comparison, every single one, leaves you somehow less than. Because there is always someone who has more, who has gone further, who looks better, who seems happier, who appears to have the version of the life you are working toward. Social media did not create this problem. But my God, did it pour gasoline on it? Because for the first time in human history, we have daily, hourly access to the highlight reels of thousands of people. We see their vacations and their promotions and their perfect families and their fitness transformations and their beautiful homes and their loving relationships. We see the absolute best of their lives, carefully curated, beautifully lit, strategically shared. And we compare all of that, all of their best, to the uncurated, unfiltered, unglamorous reality of our own daily experience. We compare their outside to our inside, and we find ourselves lacking every single time. And the devastating irony is that they are doing exactly the same thing. They are looking at your curated life and feeling exactly the same inadequacy you feel looking at theirs. We are a generation of people making each other miserable by performing happiness for each other instead of actually pursuing it for ourselves. This is madness. This is a collective madness that has become so normalized we don't even see it anymore. We have outsourced the measurement of our own lives to people who are too busy measuring their own lives to have any accurate sense of ours. And underneath all of it, underneath the comparison and the performance and the arrival fallacy and the relentless pursuit of a happiness that keeps moving, underneath all of that is something that I want to name clearly and directly, because naming it is the beginning of freedom. The biggest cause of unhappiness is the belief, the deep, foundational, unexamined belief that you are not enough as you are right now, in this moment, with this life, as this person. That belief is the prison. That belief, it can only come from inside. So what does work? The first thing that works is the thing that most people resist with their entire being: radical honesty about the story you are telling yourself. Not vague self-reflection. Not the kind of journaling where you write about how you feel and then feel the same. I mean the kind of deep, uncomfortable sit in the dark with it honesty that looks at the specific story you are living inside and asks, is this actually true? Where did this story come from? Is this my story or someone else's story that I inherited and forgot to question? Because most of the stories that are making you miserable are not yours. They were given to you. The story that success looks a particular way. The story that a worthy life has particular markers by particular ages. The story that certain kinds of work are more valuable than others. The story that your feelings are inconvenient and should be managed rather than listened to. The story that asking for help is weakness. The story that you should be further along by now. None of those stories are universal truths. They are cultural narratives. They are the particular mythology of a particular time and place. And you are living as if they are written in stone when they are actually written in sand. And you have the ability at any moment to walk away from them and begin writing something different. But you have to see them first. You have to name them. You have to have the courage to hold them up to the light and ask, does this story serve me? Does this story reflect my actual values? Not the values I was handed, but the values I would choose if I were choosing freely? Does this story lead me toward joy, toward meaning, toward genuine connection and contribution? Or does it simply perpetuate the belief that I am not enough? Let me tell you about a man named James. James was a carpenter, third generation carpenter. His grandfather had built furniture. His father had built houses. And James built things too. Beautiful, careful, intricate things that people kept for decades and sometimes passed to their children. He was extraordinary at what he did. He had a level of skill that came from loving his craft so deeply that the work itself was a form of joy. And James was ashamed of what he did for a living because the story he had absorbed from a college-educated family on his wife's side, from a social circle that measured success in degrees and titles and salaries, and story said that working with your hands was lesser. That building things was fine, but it wasn't success. Success wore a suit. Success worked in an office. Success had a business card with an impressive title that required explaining. James spent 15 years quietly ashamed of being brilliant at something beautiful. 15 years deflecting questions about his work. 15 years feeling like the person in the room who hadn't quite made it, even as the things he built with his hands were sought after and celebrated and cherished by every single person who owned one. And then his daughter, she was 11 years old, came home from school with an assignment. She had to write about a hero, a real hero, someone in her life. She wrote about her father. She wrote about watching him in his workshop. She wrote about the smell of sawdust and the sound of the tools and the way her father's face changed when he was working. How the stress went out of his body and something peaceful and sure came into it. She wrote about a rocking chair he had made for her grandmother and how her grandmother said she felt held by it in a way she had never felt held by any chair she'd bought in a store. She wrote about a boy in her class whose family couldn't afford proper furniture and how her father had quietly, without being asked, built a table for their kitchen and refused to accept any payment. She wrote, "My dad builds things that make people feel like they matter." I think that's the most important job there is. James told me he read that essay 8 times. And then he went into his workshop and he sat on the floor and he cried. Not with sadness, with something that he described as a sudden, overwhelming, long overdue recognition. Recognition that he had been spending 15 years measuring his life against the wrong ruler. That the ruler he'd been using wasn't even his. That by every measure that actually mattered, the measure of craft and care and contribution and love, he was not behind. He was exactly where he needed to be, doing exactly what he was meant to do. I had been living inside someone else's idea of success, he told me, and I was failing it. But my daughter showed me my own idea of success, and I had been living it all along. I just hadn't been able to see it because I was too busy looking through the wrong eyes. The wrong eyes. That is the biggest cause of unhappiness, living your life through the wrong eyes. Measuring your life against standards that were never yours to begin with. And this is what I need you to understand with absolute clarity. There is nothing wrong with ambition. There is nothing wrong with wanting to grow, to achieve, to create, to build, to become more. Ambition can be one of the most beautiful forces in human experience. The problem is not wanting. The problem is the source of the wanting. When your ambition comes from a place of genuine passion, when you want something because it calls to something deep and true and alive in you, that wanting feels like fuel. It energizes you. It gives your days direction and meaning. Even the difficult parts of the journey feel purposeful because the direction is yours. But when your ambition comes from a place of fear, when you want something because you believe that without it you are not enough, that without it you won't be loved or respected or safe, that wanting feels like a whip. It drives you. It punishes you for not going fast enough. It provides no satisfaction upon arrival because the fear simply finds a new target. And the journey feels like suffering because you are not running towards something that genuinely calls you. You are running away from something inside yourself. This is one of the most important distinctions in human psychology, and most people never examine it. They never ask, why do I want what I want? They never separate the desires that arise from their authentic nature from the desires that arise from fear and inadequacy and the need for external validation. And because they don't examine it, they spend their lives in relentless, joyless pursuit of things that they think they want, but that upon arrival leave them strangely empty because they were never after the thing. They were after the feeling they believed the thing would bring. And the feeling of being enough, cannot be found in any external thing. It can only be cultivated from within. So how do you begin to tell the difference? How do you start to untangle the authentic desire from the fear-based one? One practice that I have found profoundly powerful is what I call the subtraction test. And it goes like this. Take something you are currently chasing, something you believe will make you happy when you get it. And ask yourself, if I knew for certain that no one would ever know I had achieved this, if it were completely invisible to the outside world, if there were no status, no admiration, no visible signal of success, would I still want it? Not. If the answer is yes, if the thing itself, stripped of all the social signaling, still calls to you, still excites you, still feels aligned with who you most deeply are, that is a desire worth following. That is the voice of your authentic self. If the answer is no, if the appeal of the thing disappears when the audience disappears, that is a fear-based desire. That is the voice of the story that says you need to prove yourself. And following that voice will not bring you home. It will bring you further from home, with each step faster and more desperate than the last. I don't say this to diminish your goals. I say it to purify them. Because a life built on authentic desire, even a quieter, less impressive-looking life by external standards, is a life that actually feels like living. And a life built on fear-based desire, even the most objectively successful version, is a life that feels from the inside like a very elaborate performance of a person who is never quite sure they are allowed to be here. You are allowed to be here. You are allowed to be here. Let me say that again because some of you have needed to hear it for a very long time. You are allowed to be here. In your life, in your body, in your imperfect, complicated, still becoming reality. You do not need to earn your right to exist. You do not need to justify your presence with productivity. You do not need to be further along, more accomplished, more impressive, more anything. Before you are allowed to feel at peace with who you are, that peace is available to you right now. Not because you have arrived, but because you are always here. Because who you actually are, underneath the performance, underneath the comparison, underneath the relentless self-improvement project, is already inherently worthy. I want to talk about comparison specifically now, because I think it deserves its own moment. Because in my experience, comparison is perhaps the single sharpest blade in the arsenal of unhappiness, and we use it on ourselves constantly. Theodore Roosevelt said something that has never stopped being true. Comparison is the thief of joy. 3 words to really hold, thief of joy. Not the reducer of joy, not the diminisher of joy, the thief, because that is exactly how it operates. It does not announce itself. It does not ask permission. It reaches into your moment, whatever moment you are in, however good that moment might genuinely be, and it takes something from you. You get a promotion, and for one moment you feel proud, and then the comparison arrives. But so-and-so got promoted 2 years before me. But the person in the other department got a bigger raise. But by the time my father was my age, he had already done so much more. And the pride dissolves. Not because the promotion stopped being real, but because the comparison made it insufficient. You have a beautiful meal with someone you love, and the evening is warm and the conversation is good, and there is genuine joy in the room. And then you see someone's photograph on your phone of their beautiful dinner in an expensive restaurant with a stunning view. And the meal that was perfect a moment ago is somehow now ordinary. Not because the meal changed, because the comparison changed your perception of it. This is the theft. This is how comparison operates. Not by changing your reality, by changing your relationship to your reality. By making the real good, available things in your life feel insufficient by measuring them against a carefully selected comparison point that is almost always either cherry-picked, incomplete, or entirely imagined. And here is what makes comparison particularly insidious. We almost never compare fairly. We compare our worst to someone else's best. We compare our inside experience, the anxiety, the self-doubt, the confusion, the painful private moments to someone else's outside presentation, the polished, the curated, the carefully presented version of a life. We compare our beginning to someone else's middle. We compare our reality to a fantasy of someone else's reality. And we never ever compare the full picture. We never factor in what that apparently more successful person is sacrificing that we wouldn't want to sacrifice. We never consider that the thing we envy in someone else's life might come with a cost we would be unwilling to pay. We take the one dimension that flatters them and unflatters us, and we make that the whole story. It is irrational. It is also completely human. It is completely understandable. But understanding it does not make it less destructive. It makes it more important to challenge. And challenging it means developing the habit, the deliberate, practiced daily habit of catching the comparison when it arises and asking, am I comparing fairly? Am I seeing the whole picture? And even if I were, even if this comparison were entirely accurate, whose life is it that I am supposed to be living? Mine or theirs? Because here is what nobody tells you about the people you most envy. They are carrying something you cannot see. Every single one of them. The person with the perfect body is fighting a relationship with food or exercise that is quietly consuming them. The person with the perfect relationship is managing dynamics behind closed doors that would make you grateful for your own complications. The person with the brilliant career is sacrificing things, time, health, relationships, peace, that you might find you value more than the career if you stop long enough to look. This is not about tearing others down. This is not about finding fault to feel better. It is about recognizing that every life is a complete picture, and the piece of someone's picture that you are comparing to your own piece is never the whole truth. And making yourself miserable based on an incomplete comparison is not intelligence. It is a habit, and habits can be broken. I want to talk now about something that sits right at the heart of all of this, something that I believe, with everything I have, is the antidote to the biggest cause of your unhappiness. And that thing is presence. Real practiced, radical presence, not mindfulness as a trend, not the app on your phone that reminds you to breathe. I mean the genuine, difficult, countercultural practice of actually being in your life while it is happening, of bringing your full attention. Not your distracted, half here planning the next thing attention, but your real attention to the experience that is actually available to you right now. Because here is the thing about the gap between the life you have and the life you think you should have. That gap only exists in your thinking. It does not exist in the present moment. The present moment is just this, whatever this is: a breath, a heartbeat, the weight of feet on the floor, the sound in the room, this, right? And in the actual unmediated, undistracted experience of right now, there is no gap. There is only what is. And what is, when you are fully present to it, is almost always more than enough. It is actually, in most moments of most ordinary days, quite remarkable. The philosopher Lao Tzu said, if you are depressed, you are living in the past. If you are anxious, you are living in the future. If you are at peace, you are living in the present. Now, I am not so naive as to suggest that depression and anxiety are simply choices you can think your way out of. They are real, they are complex, they require real care and real support. But there is a dimension of what Lao Tzu is describing that is profoundly practical and true. Much of our suffering, not all of it, but much of it, lives in our relationship with time. We carry the weight of the past into every moment. We project the fears of the future onto every moment. And in doing so, we are never actually here. We are always somewhere else. And somewhere else is where the misery lives. Because the past, which we grieve and regret and replay, is finished. It cannot be changed. And the future, which we fear and prepare for and obsessively plan, has not yet arrived and may never arrive in the form we are imagining. The only place anything real is actually happening is here, now, this. And we miss it. We miss it almost constantly. We miss our own lives because we are too busy thinking about our lives to actually be in them. Let me tell you about a woman named Elena. Elena had been in therapy for years. Not because anything catastrophic had happened to her. Her life had been, by most measures, relatively stable. But she carried a low-grade, persistent unhappiness that she couldn't shake. She described it as feeling like she was always slightly off-center, always slightly out of sync with her own experience, like watching her own life through a window rather than living it from the inside. Her therapist, after a long time working together, gave her a simple assignment, not a complicated intervention. Just this: for 1 week, Elena was to identify 3 moments each day, just 3, when she was genuinely, fully present, when she was actually completely here. And she was to notice what those moments felt like, not analyze them, not explain them, just notice. Elena told me that the first 3 days were almost impossible. She would try to find a moment of presence and realize that she had spent the entire attempt thinking about whether she was being present enough, which meant she wasn't present at all. She would sit in the garden meaning to feel the sun and end up making a grocery list in her head. She would try to be present with her daughter's laughter and find herself mentally reviewing a work email. But on the 4th day, something happened. She was washing dishes, the most ordinary possible thing, and she felt the temperature of the water on her hands. Really felt it. And she heard the sound of the water. And she looked out the window at the tree in the garden that she had never particularly noticed before. And she stood there for probably 45 seconds in a state that she described as, and her exact words have stayed with me. She described it as accidentally inhabiting my own life. 45 seconds of actually being in her life. And she said it felt like a glass of water after a very long thirst that she hadn't even known she was carrying. That is what presence does. It does not solve the problems. It does not change the circumstances. But it dissolves the gap. It collapses the distance between the life you have and the life you are waiting for. Because in genuine presence, there is no waiting. There is only this. This ordinary, unremarkable, completely sufficient this turns out to be enough. More than enough. Astonishing, actually. When you stop rushing through it. The Vietnamese Buddhist teacher Thich Nhat Hanh spent his life teaching one thing in 100 different forms. And that thing was, the present moment is the only moment available to us, and it is the door into all moments. He would say, the present moment contains the past and the future, not as an abstract philosophical claim, but as a living experiential truth. When you are fully present, you have access to everything. When you are absent from the present, when you are somewhere else in your head, you have nothing, not even the moment you are standing in. We are absent from our lives at a staggering rate. One study found that the human mind is wandering, not present to the current experience, for nearly half of our waking hours. Nearly half. And that same study found that people were significantly less happy during moments of mind wandering than during moments of genuine presence, regardless of what they were doing or thinking about. We are unhappy almost in direct proportion to how absent we are from our own experience. And our absence is not laziness. It is not stupidity. It is a habit built by a world that is designed to capture our attention and direct it away from the present moment. A world that profits from our dissatisfaction, our distraction, our constant reaching for the next. A world that is not particularly interested in you being fully present and fully satisfied with your life right now. Because a person who is fully present and fully satisfied doesn't need to be sold anything. Reclaiming presence is therefore not just a personal practice. It is in a quiet way an act of rebellion. It is the refusal to let the machinery of distraction and comparison and perpetual dissatisfaction run your inner life. It is saying, my attention is mine, my life is mine, and I choose to be in it. Now I want to talk about something that lives underneath all of this, underneath the comparison, the performance, the arrival fallacy, the absent-mindedness. I want to talk about the relationships we have with our own emotions. Because one of the most profound and least discussed causes of unhappiness is what psychologists call experiential avoidance. The attempt to control or eliminate uncomfortable inner experiences. The determination to not feel certain things. To stay away from the pain, the grief, the fear, the anger, the loneliness, to manage them, suppress them, distract from them, numb them, rather than feeling them. And the devastating paradox is this. The more energy you invest in avoiding an emotion, the more powerful that emotion becomes. It is exactly like trying to hold a beach ball underwater. You can do it, but it takes enormous, exhausting effort, and the moment you get tired, the moment your grip slips, your attention wanders, your defenses drop. The ball explodes to the surface with far more force than if you had simply let it float. The emotions you will not feel are the ones that run your life. The grief you have refused to mourn has been making your decisions. The anger you have swallowed has been poisoning your relationships. The fear you have buried has been setting the boundaries of your world. The loneliness you have numbed has been shaping every intimacy you have ever tried to build. And the solution, the counterintuitive, difficult, ultimately liberating solution, is to feel it, to let it move through you, to stop fighting the weather of your inner world and start learning to stand in it. This does not mean being controlled by your emotions. It does not mean acting on every feeling or being at the mercy of every wave. It means allowing the feeling to exist without making it wrong, without running from it, without judging yourself for having it. It means treating your inner life with the same basic courtesy you would offer to a guest. Let it in, give it a chair, listen to what it has to say. And trust that, like all guests, it will eventually leave. Because feelings, when they are actually felt, move. They do not last forever. They come in waves and they go. What lasts, what stays, what calcifies, what becomes a permanent interior structure are the feelings we refuse to feel. Those go underground and stay there indefinitely, shaping everything without our conscious knowledge or consent. The biggest cause of your unhappiness is not the difficult feelings you have had. It is the ones you have refused to have. The grief ungrieved, the anger unexpressed, the fear unacknowledged, the loneliness unadmitted. Those unprocessed feelings have been running the show, and the moment you allow yourself to actually feel them with support, with courage, with self-compassion, something extraordinary happens. They begin to move, they begin to release. And in the space they leave behind, something opens up, something quiet and spacious and unexpectedly peaceful. That spaciousness is what genuine happiness feels like. Not an absence of difficulty, not a perpetual state of joy, but a relationship with your own inner life that is honest and open and not in constant combat with itself. A willingness to feel what you feel without making it mean something catastrophic about you. A basic, radical, fiercely protected peace with your own humanity. Let me bring this toward its close by talking about something that I believe is the ultimate antidote to the biggest cause of unhappiness, and that is gratitude. But not gratitude in the greeting card sense. Not the forced, performative, toxic positivity kind of gratitude that tells you to just be thankful for what you have and not complain. That is not gratitude. That is suppression with a cheerful face. I mean the kind of gratitude that is earned by going through difficulty. The kind that comes from having faced the darkness and discovered, on the other side of it, that the light was always there. The kind that is not a denial of pain, but a recognition, alongside the pain, of what is also true. What is also true, alongside your struggle and your imperfection and your distance from the life you imagine, is that you are alive, you are breathing. You have a mind that can hold this conversation and a heart that can feel it. There are people in the world, I promise you there are people in the world who would trade their circumstances for yours in a heartbeat. Not because your life is easy, but because their lives are harder in ways you cannot fully imagine. And I do not say that to guilt you out of your pain. Your pain is real, and it is yours, and it does not become less real because someone else's is worse. But I do say it because the practice of genuine gratitude, the practice of turning toward what is actually available to you, what is actually good and real and present in your life, is one of the most powerful antidotes to the gap between what you have and what you think you should have. Because gratitude closes the gap, not by changing your circumstances, by changing your relationship to your circumstances, by turning your attention for a moment away from what is missing and toward what is here. And in doing so, it reveals that what is here is more than you have been giving it credit for. The research on gratitude is unambiguous. People who practice it, genuinely, regularly, specifically, report dramatically higher levels of well-being, significantly lower levels of anxiety and depression, better sleep, stronger relationships, greater resilience in the face of difficulty. It is one of the most robustly supported psychological interventions in existence. And it doesn't require perfection. It doesn't require that everything is fine. It only requires a few moments each day of honest attention to the real specific things in your life that are good. Not the grand Instagram-worthy things, the small ones, the ones that were always there but that you stopped seeing. The coffee that was exactly the right temperature, the voice of someone you love, the fact that your body carried you through another day, the sunset you almost walked past, the memory that arrived suddenly and made you smile, the stranger who held the door, the feeling of clean sheets, the moment brief and ordinary and sufficient when things were okay. These are not small things. These are your life. The small, ordinary, beautiful, fleeting, irreplaceable moments of your actual life. And they are available to you in abundance right now. Not when things get better. Now, the person who is looking for happiness in the future, in the promotion, the relationship, the achievement, the arrival, is walking through a garden of it right now without looking down. Look down. Stop. Look at what is actually here. And now I want to close with something I need you to carry out of this room. Not a list of things to do. One thing, one reorientation, one shift in how you move through your days from this moment forward. Stop living as if happiness is something that will happen to you. Stop treating your life as a project that needs to be completed before you are allowed to enjoy it. Stop using the gap between where you are and where you think you should be as evidence that something is wrong with you. Stop measuring your insides against other people's outsides. Stop performing and start actually showing up. And start, please, I am asking you to start treating your actual, available, imperfect, unremarkable, extraordinary life as the real thing, as the whole thing, as the thing that is worth your full, unhurried, undistracted, genuinely grateful attention. You are not in a waiting room. This is not the preamble to your real life. This is it. These days, these relationships, these ordinary moments, this body, this heart, this completely sufficient and wildly underappreciated present moment, this is your life. And you can be happy in it. Not despite its imperfections, not when you have fixed them, in it as it is now. I want to tell you about David one more time. The man who defined a good day as one where he didn't feel behind. I spoke with David again about a year after our first conversation. He had done something I did not expect. He hadn't changed his job or his house or his marriage. Or his marriage. He hadn't made any dramatic external changes at all. What he had changed was the story. He had started examining it. Slowly, painfully, with a lot of resistance. And he had started separating the parts that were actually his from the parts that had been handed to him by a culture and a family and a comparison-driven world that never really had his best interests at heart. And he had started asking himself each morning a different question. Not am I on track, but what is actually good about today? He told me that the first week he couldn't find anything, that the question felt foreign and almost irritating, like being asked to locate something in a room he'd never visited. But he kept asking, and slowly, very slowly, things started to appear. The way his daughter laughed at breakfast, the 15 minutes he had in the car before the noise of the day began, when he could listen to music he actually liked. The colleague who genuinely made him laugh, the walk he took at lunch when the weather was decent. The moment each evening just before sleep, when his wife's breathing slowed and he knew she was okay. Small things, ordinary things, things that had been available to him every single day for 11 years while he was looking at the gap. I'm not suddenly perfectly happy, he told me. I still have hard days. I still feel behind sometimes. But something has shifted, something fundamental. I feel like I've moved from the audience of my own life back onto the stage. And even when the stage is messy and the lines aren't perfect and the audience isn't cheering, I am in it. I am actually in it. And that feeling of being in my own life, that is better than anything I was chasing before. That is it. That is all of it. The biggest cause of your unhappiness is the belief that your life, as it is, not enough, that you are not enough, that the present moment is merely a waiting room for a better future. And the cure, the real, lasting, radical cure, is the courageous daily countercultural decision to come back. To come back to your own life, to come back to the present moment, to come back to yourself, not the performed self, not the achieving self, not the self that is trying so hard to measure up, the real self, the one that was always here underneath all of it, the one that does not need to be proven or earned or justified, the one that is enough. You are enough, not in some distant theoretical once you fixed everything way. Right now, today, with this life and this body and these circumstances and these imperfections and this incomplete, still becoming fully human version of yourself. Right now, you are enough. And the moment you begin to live from that truth, really live from it, not just think it but feel it, believe it, act from it, the gap closes. Not because your life gets bigger, because you stop standing outside it, measuring it, because you finally at long last come inside. Your life is waiting, not in the future, here, right? And it is, I promise you, more beautiful than you have been allowing yourself to see. Thank you.